You know what they say about love, right? That it can't be bought. That it's this sacred, untouchable thing that exists somewhere beyond money, beyond transactions, beyond the dirty reality of survival. Yeah, well, I used to believe that too. Used to think there were lines you couldn't cross, boundaries that stayed firm no matter how desperate you got. But that night, that night, he almost did it. He almost bought something I didn't even know I still had left to sell. Let me back up a second, because you need to understand where my head was at, where my life was at. It was one of those nights where the apartment felt smaller than usual, you know? Like the walls were closing in, and the only sounds were the hum of that old refrigerator that never quite shut up, and the distant noise of the city creeping through my cracked window. I remember standing there in front of my mirror just staring, brushing my hair like it was some kind of ritual. Like if I did it enough times, I could brush away everything else too. And that's when I noticed them. The streaks of gray starting to show through. Not a lot, not yet, but enough. Enough to remind me that time doesn't give a damn about your plans or your dreams, or how much you're struggling. It just keeps moving, leaving its marks on you whether you're ready or not. Here's the thing about men, most men anyway, they don't notice those kinds of details. They don't see the gray hairs, or the tired eyes, or the way your hands shake sometimes when you think no one's looking. And maybe that's exactly why I always made sure the lipstick was red. Bright, bold, impossible to miss. The eyes darkened with just enough liner to make them mysterious, seductive even. Little distractions, you know? Tiny illusions of power when you don't have any real power left. I ran my fingers over the cracks at the corner of that mirror, feeling the rough edges under my fingertips. Funny how something so small could feel so significant, right? Those cracks reminded me that nothing lasts forever. Not glass, not youth, not trust, especially not trust. That shatters the easiest of all. Outside my window, rain was starting to tap against the glass like some kind of warning. Soft at first, then more insistent, more urgent. Like the universe itself was trying to tell me something. Don't go. Stay inside. Stay safe. But I went anyway. You want to know why? Because the bills don't wait. Because hunger and loneliness have sharper teeth than pride ever will. Because when you're living on the edge like I was, you don't have the luxury of listening to warnings, even when they come from your own gut. I chose the black dress carefully that night. Everything I do is careful, calculated. It had to be tight enough to draw attention, to make them look, to make them want, but loose enough that I could escape if I had to. If things went wrong, if the night turned dangerous, and believe me, nights can turn dangerous real quick in my line of work. Perfume behind my ears, that spot where the pulse beats steady, powder over the faint bruises that no one ever asked about, because no one ever wants to know those stories. Everything in place. Everything rehearsed. I'd done this dance 1,000 times before, maybe more. I'd stopped counting somewhere along the way. The streets were empty as I walked, not unusual for that time of night, in that part of the city. Puddles reflected the neon signs from the bars and motels, all those colors bleeding together into this rain-soaked watercolor painting that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so damn sad. I rehearsed my smile in my mind as I walked, practicing it like an actress before a show. Polite but distant, warm but not too warm. A smile that promised just enough to keep them talking, but never promised anything real. And then I saw him. The man who didn't belong here. Not really. Not in this neighborhood. Not on this street. Not in my world. You can always tell, you know? The ones who don't fit. His suit was too clean, pressed and perfect, like he'd just come from some corporate office or fancy dinner. His shoes were too polished, reflecting the neon lights like mirrors. Everything about him screamed money, class, a different life entirely. But it was his eyes that caught me. That stopped me in my tracks. Most men, when they look at you in my profession, they look through you. You're not a person, you're a thing, a service, a body, a transaction. Their eyes are empty or hungry or calculating, but never really seeing. But this guy, he looked at me, really looked like I was a person, like I mattered, and that was terrifying, honestly, because I'd worked so hard to stop being a person, to become just a role, just a performance. It was safer that way. His eyes were curious but also searching, and underneath all that, there was something else. Fear, maybe? Vulnerability? I couldn't quite place it, but it was there, clear as day. When he spoke, his voice was soft, careful, almost like he was afraid to break me, or maybe afraid to break himself. I was expecting the usual questions, the usual dance. How much? What do you do? Where can we go? But instead, he threw me completely off guard. He asked for my name, my actual name, not the name I use for work, not the persona, not the character I play. My name, and I froze. Because no one ever asks for that. Names make things real, you see. Names mean you're human. Names mean you exist beyond the transaction, beyond the money, beyond the night. And reality was never part of my deal. Reality was something I'd learned to avoid at all costs. I should have walked away right then, should have flashed that rehearsed smile, said the usual words, named my price, and disappeared into the night, like I always did. Clean, simple, safe. But something in his gaze made me hesitate. Made my feet stop moving, even though my brain was screaming at me to run. Maybe it was the quiet sorrow I saw there, reflecting back at me like a mirror. Maybe I recognized it because it matched my own. Maybe I just wanted to know if his pain was louder than mine, if someone else out there was carrying weight as heavy as what I carried every single day. He asked me, almost casually, like he was commenting on the weather, "Do you ever feel lonely?" I almost laughed. Actually, I think I did laugh, just a little. A short, bitter sound that surprised even me. Lonely. It's like asking a drowning woman if she's wet. Like asking a bird if it knows about the sky. Loneliness wasn't something I felt sometimes. It was the air I breathed, the water I swam in, the constant companion that never left. But then he smiled. Small and tired, the kind of smile you make when you realize someone sees all your darkness and doesn't flinch, doesn't turn away, doesn't judge. And he said something that threw me even more off balance. He said he only wanted to talk, just talk. Now, I'd heard that before, plenty of times. From men who thought words were just another way to undress you, another strategy, another game. But the way he said it was different. He spoke slowly, deliberately. Every word seemed careful, measured, like each syllable was being weighed on some scale I didn't know existed. Like words actually mattered to him. We ended up sitting across from each other, in this dim corner of a quiet bar. The kind of place where nobody asks questions, and the bartender knows when to disappear. Shadows stretched long across the room, making everything feel dreamlike, suspended in time. And he started asking me things. Not the things men usually ask. He asked where I grew up, what I dreamed about as a child, what I wanted to be before life got in the way. No one ever asks that. Dreams are luxuries in rooms like this, in lives like mine. Dreams are dangerous, because they remind you of everything you've lost, everything you'll never have. But I told him anyway. I don't know why. Maybe because it felt good to remember, just for a moment, that I used to be someone who had dreams. I told him I wanted to be a dancer once. A real dancer, you know, ballet, contemporary, something beautiful and free, something that mattered. He smiled at that. Softly, gently, without a trace of mockery. And then he said something that almost broke me. He said he could see it. Said my hands, the way I tilted my head, the way I moved, all carried this rhythm that I didn't even remember having anymore. Like the dancer was still in there somewhere, buried, but not dead. I almost laughed again. Almost. But it caught in my throat, because it was too dangerous to remember softness there, in that moment. Softness gets you hurt. Softness makes you vulnerable, and I couldn't afford vulnerable. We kept talking. The kind of quiet conversation where silence itself has weight, has meaning. I could hear his breathing, uneven yet deliberate, like he was trying to control something inside himself, and suddenly, I realized the world outside had disappeared. The city, the rain, the neon lights, the reality of what I was and what I did, all of it just faded away. It was just us, two broken people sharing space in the darkness. He told me about a woman he'd lost. Not dead, he clarified, just gone. She'd slipped through his fingers like sand, like water, like smoke. And as he talked, I realized something frightening, something that made my heart race with a fear I didn't understand. He wasn't here to consume me, he wasn't here to use me, or buy me, or take something from me. He was here to witness something. Maybe me, maybe himself, maybe both, and that's when he reached for my hand. It wasn't a demand, it wasn't a transaction, it wasn't the beginning of something physical, or transactional, it was just warmth. Just connection. Just one human being, reaching out to another in the darkness. And for one breath, just one single breath, I allowed myself to feel something human, something that wasn't priced, wasn't tagged, wasn't owned. You don't have to sell yourself tonight, he whispered. I almost laughed again. That bitter, broken laugh, that had become my default response to anything that sounded too good to be true. Choice. That was something I thought I'd buried deep a long time ago. Choice was a luxury I couldn't afford, a fantasy I'd given up on. But the certainty in his voice, soft yet insistent, made me wonder. Made me think that maybe, just for this one night, I could choose. I could be something other than what I'd become. Time lost all meaning after that. The rain softened to a gentle whisper against the windows. Mist curled through the streetlights outside, like smoke from a fire long extinguished. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about pain and loss, and the ways we survive when survival seems impossible, about the masks we wear, and the people we used to be. When morning finally crept across the curtains, painting the room in soft gray light, he was still there, still sitting across from me, still looking at me like I mattered. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to memorize something he'd never be able to hold on to. Some fragment of the night, some piece of whatever this was, and then he said something that I knew would haunt me forever. I came here to forget her, but I think I'll remember you instead. The night had grown too long, and yet somehow still too brief. How does that happen? How can something feel endless, and not enough at the same time? I traced the rim of my glass with one finger, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, like each breath carried untold stories, secrets I'd never fully know. He leaned closer then, not in acclaim, not in possession, but in intimacy. A whisper, 3 words that changed everything. I see you. And God help me, I wanted to be seen. I wanted it so badly it hurt, but seeing someone is dangerous when you've spent years armoring every part of yourself, when you've built walls so high and thick, that even you can't remember what's behind them anymore. He asked about my past then. The real past, not the sanitized version. Men I'd let in before, nights I'd survived, that I wished I could forget, moments I'd wished would disappear into nothing. And I spoke, softly, carefully, as if the words themselves might shatter me if I said them too loud or too fast. No lies this time, only fragments I trusted to the shadows, only truths I'd never spoken out loud before. I remembered watching the clock as we talked, watching it crawl forward, like it feared the night would end. Like it wanted to protect us from the morning, from reality, from everything waiting outside that small sacred space we'd created. Each sentence we exchanged was a thread, weaving a bridge I never thought I'd cross willingly. Yet there we were, meeting in the middle, 2 people who shouldn't have connected but somehow did. He reached for my hand again. Deliberate, intentional, like he'd thought about it, and decided it was worth the risk. My pulse quickened, but not from desire, from fear, pure, raw fear. Because attachment in my world always comes at a cost, always. And the cost is usually more than you can afford to pay. You have no idea how dangerous it is to let someone in, he murmured, like he could read my thoughts. I nodded, hating the truth in my gesture, hating that he was right, hating that I knew exactly what he meant, because I'd learned that lesson the hard way too many times to count. The night ended with silence. Not words, not promises, not declarations, just silence, heavy and full of everything we couldn't say. He left before the sun fully rose, while the world was still gray and uncertain, and he left behind a note. Just a simple piece of paper with words that would echo in my mind for days, weeks, months to come. You deserve more than what you give yourself. I laughed when I read it. Softly, bitterly, the sound hollow in the empty room. Because the cruel irony wasn't lost on me. I had sold nothing that night. Not my body, not my time, not the usual transaction, and yet I'd lost everything. I'd lost the armor, the protection, the distance that kept me safe. The streets were quiet when I finally went back out. Mist curling, like smoke from a fire long extinguished, like the remnants of something beautiful that had burned out too fast. I looked down at the paths I'd walked countless times before, paths I knew by heart, and they felt alien, dangerous in a new way, and somehow, impossibly, intimate. I touched my reflection in the mirror when I got home. Really looked at myself for the first time, in a long time. The red lipstick, slightly smudged now, the tired eyes that had seen too much. The faint smile, I didn't even know I had, lingering at the corners of my mouth like a ghost. I was still here, still standing, still breathing, but changed. Marked, altered in some fundamental way I couldn't quite name. I poured myself a glass of wine. Cheap stuff, the kind that burns a little going down. I opened my diary, the one I kept hidden in the back of my closet, and I wrote, my hand shaking slightly as the words appeared on the page. I sold my heart, not my body, and he never came back to pay the rest. Because that's the truth, isn't it? The truth they don't tell you when you enter this life. You can protect your body. You can keep it separate, keep it distant, keep it safe. But your heart? Your heart is the thing you can't control. Your heart is the thing that betrays you in the end. Secrets deserve witnesses, even when they cost your heart, even when they leave you more alone than you were before, even when they change everything and nothing all at once. That was the night I learned that some things can't be bought, but they can be given. And sometimes, the giving is what destroys you,